Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on achieving academic credit through Portsmouth University and the Emergency Planning College. I'm Angela Kirkesh, and I'm the Learning Development Manager at the Emergency Planning College. We've had a flood of inquiries since announcing the EPC Portsmouth partnership, and I'm hoping that this webinar will answer a lot of your questions. Professor Edward Borovich will talk you through the background and process of gaining academic accreditation through our organisations. Throughout the presentation, you will have the opportunity to pose questions using the chat screen facility, which is located in the bottom left of your screen, just below the actual presentation. These will be anonymous, and I'll be the one that's choosing the questions to ask, and if we don't get through them all, there will be the opportunity for us to respond to you later after the presentation. But we will try and respond to as many of the questions as we can at the end of Ed's presentation. So no more from me. I can now hand you over to Ed Borovich of Portsmouth University. Ed.
Thank you very much, Angela, and good morning to you all. My name is Edward Borovich. I'm sorry it's a little bit of a mouthful. I'm a Professor of Risk and Crisis Management at Portsmouth University. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to present this webinar about the accreditation process and the partnership between Portsmouth University and the Emergency Planning College. I have been here at Portsmouth for the past 8 years, and over the last 20-odd years I've been involved in working with the Emergency Planning College by contributing directly to courses, and one of the greatest accolades so far has been to set up this partnership arrangement between the two institutions, which I think is highly complementary and will be of benefit to all concerned. And offers a great opportunity for people who want to study risk and crisis and resilience, either through the EPC or through Portsmouth, or mix and matching between the two institutions, which have a lot of highly complementary offerings to choose from. If I move on to my next slide, as you'll see, the subject of risk, crisis, disaster and resilience is a subject that just keeps growing and growing with interest. We live in very interesting times. We see interest in risk and resilience because of natural disasters, fires, volcanoes, floods, and these types of problems, severe weather, will continue. The difference between the past and the future is quite simply that we're going to see a lot more of these things, not because the intensity or the number of them are increasing, but because the number of people on the planet is increasing, which means they're more likely to interact with humans. We're more likely to see floods affecting places that weren't a problem in the past but are now, because there's simply more people living in those floodplains. As we saw with the volcano eruption in Iceland 3 or 4 years ago, the effect of that on aviation was really quite serious. Yet 200-300 years ago, when it last exploded, it had no effect at all because there was no aviation. So it's us that have changed in terms of the way we use the planet and the number of us that are using the planet that's driving this increased interest there. Public safety, again, we see increased and intensified interest in how public safety could and should be managed. And these are subjects, again, that are covered both in the Portsmouth programmes and also in the programmes that are taught at the Emergency Planning College. I was saying just before this session started that yesterday I was at my local sports centre in Hedge End, down here on the south coast, and we saw an evacuation of an enormous Marks and Spencer's and Sainsbury's superstore complex following a gas release, and something like 60 people were affected by that. Again, what we see here is the impact of large numbers of people being crowded into relatively small areas, highly complex, crowded areas, and suddenly the effect of something going wrong. We suddenly have a major event on our hands. Terrorism is another factor that's been of interest of recent years. It's in the UK it's been something of interest for many years, but we now see a much more complex form of international terrorism. And we tend to think of terrorism in terms of political terrorism, but there's also terrorism of other kinds, protesters protesting against various types of things. These are issues, again, which are covered in both the courses at Portsmouth and also the courses at the Emergency Planning College. So there is a combination of interesting approaches to these areas that are offered by both institutions. Chemical, nuclear, business continuity, pandemic, disease, these are all things that are of strategic interest to the safety and well-being and the management of an orderly society. Now, the way the courses are designed at the two different institutions are different, but what we are able to do is that we're able to look at different courses at the Emergency Planning College, and they are accredited against our MSCs here at Portsmouth. Now, if I just briefly outline the offerings that we actually have here and how they relate to the Emergency Planning College. We have three separate master's degree pathways here at Portsmouth. There's a master's in security management, a master's in crisis and disaster management, and a master's in risk, crisis and resilience. The latter of which I'm involved with myself, but I do teach on all three of those programs. But the latter of which is in the business school, which is also my home here in Portsmouth. Now, technically, it is possible to do, and these master's courses will contain typically 4 modules that you have to, compulsory modules that you have to pass. And in addition, to convert the program into a full master's, you would then need to take a double module, which is the dissertation that you would study. Now, what we're able to do with this partnership arrangement is that up to 3 of those 4 modules, the taught modules, you can do virtually all of the lectures up at Easingwold at the Emergency Planning College or at other locations where the Emergency Planning College offers its programs. And the only thing you would need to do in terms of the Portsmouth part of the program in order to get the degree accreditation is you would need to take the written assignment, which we would pass. So while you're on the courses at Easingwold, you would be given a very equivalent lectures that would have an equivalent content to the content of the modules that you would have taken at Portsmouth. At the end of that, if you then wanted to have that module assessed and APEL'd for Accredited Prior Learning to be included in our Masters, then you would have to take an assessment. But prior to that assessment, we would give you a reading list with some additional reading that we might suggest you look at, and you would also get some tutorial guidance from the course director or the unit directors of the particular units you're taking in order to help you complete that assessment and hopefully get a very good pass. So that's the way the partnership would work. And once you've got your APEL 3 units, then you would only have to take a 4th unit, and then you'd be able to immediately move on to the dissertation part of the program. We also have one undergraduate pathway, and that's a little bit more complicated in terms of what's APEL'd against that. But again, there are similar APEL routes where you can take some of the undergraduate program at the Emergency Planning College. If I just say a few words about the 3 different master's pathways, the first pathway that I mentioned, the Masters in Security Management, while primarily designed more for people in the security industry, and it is based in the Institute of Criminal Justice Studies here at Portsmouth, it is primarily geared towards people interested in security, but it will have elements of crisis and risk and emergency planning in it. But that would be subsidiary to the main aim of the course. And I believe you are able to APEL at least 2 of the units on that particular program. The MSc in Crisis and Disaster Management is taught in SEAS, the School of Earth and Environmental Studies, and as might be suggested by the name of the department where it is taught, it's more geographically based. It's slightly more sciencey based. It's very much looking in particular at things like natural phenomena like volcanoes, earthquakes, seismic type risks, and looking at disaster response in terms of major disasters, mega disasters, and how one tries to prepare and respond to those types of events. Typically where you have displaced populations of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and the requirements there would be typically food, shelter, medicine, and subsistence life forms. The MSc in the business school, the MSc in Risk, Crisis and Resilience, is more designed for people in the emergency planning, business continuity, risk management world who are looking at dealing with the types of UK type crises we're more familiar with. They may or could involve casualties and emergency planning and crisis and disaster management response. Typically the numbers are smaller. Typically UK disasters don't tend to kill a lot of people, thankfully. They tend to have much more of a business continuity slant, so it's much more interested in looking at how you get businesses up and running again, keeping the economy stable. It does look at terrorism, because clearly terrorism is something that can affect business and organisational activity. So the courses, although the names may sound quite similar, and they certainly do have common units amongst the courses, the main inspiration for the courses is quite different. So it is worth looking at the 3 different programs distinctly and working out which is the pathway that's most appropriate for the direction that you might want to go in. Then going and looking at the emergency planning course units and looking at the ones that are APEL'd against that particular pathway, so you choose the units that are empathetic to the direction that you want to actually go in. Reasons why we've done this partnership, well, frankly, if you've never been to the Emergency Planning College, then you desperately need to go there. It's a wonderful place, not just because of the peace and solitude and the wonderful rural location. It's got probably one of the best libraries on crisis and disaster management to be found anywhere in Europe. It's got wonderful friendly lecturers who are very able and willing to help when you've got any questions or problems in this whole area. And it's a wonderful space, unlike a university, which these days have become quite frenetic places. They're almost like airports with thousands of people milling around and lectures starting and stopping. The Emergency Planning College actually gives you the time and space to think about some of the concepts that you're doing. So there are advantages to doing some of your units at the EPC as opposed to doing them at the university. And I think mixing and matching your studies so you're getting exposed to both locations, I think is a really good way of getting a rounded and good approach to what it is you're trying to achieve academically. The final part of the degree programme involves doing a dissertation. And again, this is where the EPC, although the course will be primarily, the dissertation unit is primarily managed here at Portsmouth, and it will involve a dialogue between yourself and a supervisor, the facilities at EPC will be very useful if you need to get up there and do some reading in their library and sift through some of the reading materials. Again, you've got that background there that will be extremely useful. And the idea of the dissertation is it's not a fixed topic. It doesn't matter which of the 3 pathways you choose. You choose a dissertation that is relevant to what it is you aspire to want to do. And that could be different. Some students are looking at a dissertation as a means to an end to completing a master's. Some are looking to do something that's going to be highly relevant to the types of work that they're involved in. So, for example, you might have an interest in evacuations because you work in the police and you're very interested in how you can improve police evacuations at major events. It might be that you have an interest in a particular area that you're looking to follow up for further studies. You might be looking to do an MPhil or a PhD following your master's, in which case you might want to gear your dissertation towards that area. So the course has quite a lot of flexibility in terms of A, what you actually study on the course, and B, how you then gear that course so it takes you in the right trajectory to where you want to go next in your life. We also have here at Portsmouth a variety of very good PhD students. I've got about 7 or 8 at the moment, and some of my colleagues have got similar numbers. So we have quite a cadre of people actually working at doctorate level. And again, there's possibilities there for looking at further types of communicative things between the EPC and Portsmouth if you wanted to take your masters further. If I just move on to the next slide. I think I've actually said everything that's on the next slide, so I do apologise for being rather slow moving that one on. Let's go on to the next one. Questions and answers. Do we have any questions coming up yet? I can't see anything on my screen.
Yes, actually, Ed, if I can join you there. Thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much for that. Hopefully, you have covered quite a few of the inquiries that I seem to get on a regular basis. But one of the questions that's appeared is definitely about modes of attendance. A few of our customers that say have got 3 or maybe 6 units that they've covered with us, they're wanting to know, how do they attend Portsmouth to complete their MSc? Can it all be through distance learning? Will they actually physically have to visit the university? Or as you referred to, especially with the dissertation, it could be by a telephone conversation and things like that.
Okay, yes, let me do it. So let's imagine we've got a person who has hypothetically done 6 units at the EPC. And those 6 units would enable that student to get APEL'd against 2 of our units, which means they would still have the assessment requirement for those 2 units. They would need to write an extended essay, and we'd provide them with a reading list and some guidance in order to do that. That would leave 2 units remaining that they would need to complete at Portsmouth. The way our units are taught at Portsmouth is that they're taught in block format. So you would come down and you would get 3 days of, the units typically have 6 days of attendance. So you would need to come for 2 3-day blocks in order to complete each of those 2 remaining units. About 50% of our current students are part-time students who are in full-time work. And it's designed so that you can take a short break from work, come in and en bloc do your lectures down here. If you had done 6 units at EPC, you could even do another unit by doing another 3 2-day units at the EPC, and you might be able to get APEL'd against the 3rd one, which would actually leave you with only 1 unit left where you'd have to physically attend, which would mean you'd physically have to be here for a minimum of 6 days in order to complete the taught part of the MSc. The dissertation, once you've been assigned to a dissertation supervisor, you would need to write a proposal, and the unit you would need to take here at Portsmouth is actually the Research Methods unit, where we would help you design and develop your proposal. Once assigned to a supervisor, it's really up to the supervisor and the student to flexibly arrange meetings in a way that works for both of them. I sometimes talk to my students when I'm supervising them on Skype, on various different kinds of social media systems. It works extremely well. I can sit and talk to a student from my home or my desk. They can talk to me from their home or desk. We can have a meeting, and we don't have the awkwardness of having to make a long journey to somewhere where we can mutually meet. All work can be submitted to me electronically. I can submit stuff to them electronically. It's not a problem, and certainly I even supervise students on the other side of the world, and have done, and that system seems to work quite well.
I think it's fair to say, Ed, that if you're pursuing the MSc route, the postgraduate route, that it is as flexible as it possibly can be, short of being totally distance learning, and I think it's fair to comment. And another question, I see we have got another question about costs, but I'll get onto that in a moment. The maximum, just to solve a problem for some people, the maximum you can take with the emergency primary college is 9 of our courses, which equates to 50% contribution towards the full MSc. And linking to costs, that will actually give you a discount from the full cost of the MSc. Exactly what that is, Ed, I'm not sure at the moment, but we can certainly provide that information later on for anybody who wants to use their email.
I do believe that cost also changes depending on the nationality of the student.
It does, yeah.
So I think British and European students, when I say European, I mean European Union students, would pay one rate, and international, as in outside of the EU, would pay another rate. There would still be the 50%, but it would be a 50% of the going rate.
Okay. We do have an inquiry about the costs involved on the undergraduate course. Now, I believe, are you aware of that, Ed, the cost?
I'm not. I mean, I used to teach that course about 8 years ago, and I suspect the costs have moved on. I mean, in terms of cost, the quickest way to get a pricing would probably be to ring the relevant course director for the the programme that you're thinking of pursuing.
Indeed, but as I said, we will get these answers to you because we do have the emails of everyone who's participating, and we can send those details to you personally.
Brilliant.
Okay, but another question I have got in is regarding somebody who's done, say, a couple of units with the EPC, and they actually want to go on to the MSc route, for example, but they want to study more units with the EPC first. I think you covered that. I think that's certainly possible, isn't it, Ed?
Absolutely. The question is just to make sure you choose the right one.
Exactly.
So that you get the full APEL accreditation when you've got the requisite number.
Okay. We have a direct question here from a group manager at Scottish Fire. He says he already has a Master's in Public Administration and has completed 5 modules with the EPC. Will he still have to do the research methodology unit? He's trying to decide whether to go on with this option or a PhD.
My advice, if you have a Master's, what value would a second Master's give you? I shouldn't discourage anybody from doing a Master's. It sounds to me that your background knowledge and information, your courses that you've done at the EPC, together would probably make you ideally suited to go straight to a PhD. The difference being that the PhD, of course, is a program of study by research, whereas a Master's is a taught program. And it might be that you think there's value in doing the Masters because you would like to have some structured taught units that you think are in areas that you haven't covered. Personally, my view would be that you would probably be better off going straight onto the PhD program. You would, in any case, if you did a PhD, be registered for an MPhil first. And I'm sure there would be a possibility to go over any bits that you thought you were missing in that MPhil study period.
Okay, thanks for that. We've a query now about international students. As you know, Ed, we do cater for quite a wide variety of international students here at the Emergency Planning College, and the inquiries around variations for international students. Now, I believe this will be concerning accreditation for those studied here, but also potentially the ability to accredit units for those studying in the Middle East, for example.
Well, if they've done an emergency planning college course, a recognised emergency planning college course, which could have been taught in any location, because the emergency planning college doesn't teach everything at Easingwold, they do teach in other locations, then that course counts.
And hopefully that will answer Mr. Reese's question.
Yeah. So, it doesn't matter, for example, if you've done a course which is identical to a course that's taught in Easingwold, but it happened to be delivered in Dubai or Hong Kong, for argument's sake, it's still the same course, so you still get the same accreditation for it.
Thanks for that, Ed. I don't see any more questions. I think probably one of the other questions I do get asked a lot is how quickly can someone achieve the MSc? I know that's a bit of an open-ended question in that it depends how much they've got. But
okay. So imagine you've done 9 units already at the EPC, and you contacted the course director tomorrow and said, I'd like to complete the MSc. You would need to write 3 essays. You would need to take the 4th unit, which would be sometime, I imagine, around Easter time. And then you'd be able to start on your dissertation as soon as you'd completed the 4 assignments and passed them. No reason why you shouldn't have a master's degree by September next year.
Okay, thanks for that.
And with 6 days attendance here.
That is quick. Okay, then thanks ever so much for that, Ed. And as there are no more questions coming up on the screen at the moment, I'd just like to thank everybody who's been involved with this, all those that have joined us. And if anybody would like to speak to us personally, both myself and Ed will be down in Birmingham next week on the 25th and 26th at the NEC at the Emergency Services Show at stand B21. And thank you all for joining.
Alternatively, you can always ring me, and I'm always happy to take queries here at the university.
Our details are on the slides. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Angela, and thank you very much, everyone that's been listening to this presentation.